Chapter 1. A Normal Man in a Normal Marriage. The sound of the garage door grinding closed behind him was the most familiar part of Daniel's day. He stepped inside, wiping the grease off his hands with a faded rag, his boots dragging dust and grit from the auto shop into the tiled entryway of the modest home he worked so hard to afford. The smell of lavender air freshener mixed with something artificial and cold. Vanessa's new perfume, he thought. Another brand, another bottle, another sign of something he couldn't quite name. "Vanessa? I'm home," he called out, dropping his keys into the ceramic bowl near the door. The house was quiet, too quiet. No sounds of dinner being made. No welcoming hug. No excited kids running up the hallway. Just the faint ticking of a wall clock and the low hum of a TV upstairs. He exhaled through his nose, more habit than disappointment. Lately, she'd been distant. Daniel made his way to the kitchen and peeked into the oven. Empty. He checked the stove, clean and used. There were no dishes in the sink, no smells of cooking, no sign that Vanessa had touched anything since he'd left for work 12 hours ago. Just a wine glass on the counter, half full, and a lipstick smudge on the rim. He poured himself a glass of water and took a long sip. His stomach growled, but he ignored it. He'd gotten used to this over the past few months. Takeout, leftovers, whatever he could scrape together after a long day. She used to pack him lunch every morning, greet him with dinner on the table at night. Now this. He walked upstairs slowly, his steel-toed boots thudding against the hardwood. The master bedroom door was cracked open, and he pushed it wider with a gentle nudge. Vanessa was lying on the bed, legs curled up, face lit by the bluish glow of her phone. She didn't look up as he entered. She didn't even flinch. "Hey, babe, you okay?" he asked, his voice soft. Vanessa didn't look up. Her fingers kept moving across the screen, scrolling. Her thumb paused for a second, then resumed. "Fine. Just tired," she replied flatly, her eyes still glued to the phone. Daniel lingered in the doorway. He wanted to say more. Ask about her day. Tell her about the asshole who tried to cheat him out of an oil change. Ask why she hadn't called, or cooked, or kissed him. But he didn't. Instead, he just nodded like a man trained by repetition to expect less. He changed out of his dirty uniform, showered, and sat down on the edge of the bed. Vanessa didn't shift to make room for him. He slid a little closer and gently placed his hand on her calf. Her skin felt cool, lotion soft, but she tensed beneath his touch. "You sure everything's all right?" he asked again, quietly. She sighed and put the phone down, but still didn't look at him. "I said I'm fine, Daniel. Don't start, okay? Don't start." That stung more than he let show. "I wasn't starting anything," he said. "I just wanted to talk." "Well, I don't. I've had a long day." He gave a short nod and got up, heading to the hallway. As he passed the mirror by the dresser, he caught a glimpse of himself, tired eyes, rough hands, shoulders bent slightly forward. A man who gave everything and got breadcrumbs in return. Downstairs, he found a bag of chips and a soda, sat on the couch, and flipped through the channels. The house echoed with silence. The kids were staying over at her sister's tonight. Vanessa had arranged it last minute. No explanation, just that they'll be back tomorrow. Daniel munched quietly, trying to lose himself in a rerun of a comedy show he used to enjoy. But the laughter felt hollow. His phone buzzed. A message from Mike, his co-worker and oldest friend. "Still coming over for the game Saturday? Bring that homemade chili if you can. Vanessa's letting you out of the cage, right?" Daniel didn't reply. He stared at the screen, thumb hovering over the keyboard, then locked it and placed it face down. Upstairs, the bedroom light turned off. He heard the bed creak. No goodnight, no kiss, no warmth. He ran a hand over his face. There was a time when she would call him just to hear his voice. When she'd sneak into the garage with a sandwich and a smile. When she'd wrap her arms around him and whisper, "You're my whole world." Now, she was dressing up to go grocery shopping, but coming back with no bags. She was working late shifts she never mentioned before. She was on her phone constantly, smiling at it, laughing sometimes, but never with him. And he was still here, still working double shifts to pay off the mortgage, still waking up early to warm up the car for her. Still the same Daniel, just more tired. The clock struck midnight. He climbed the stairs again, this time quieter, slower, like a man unsure if he belonged in his own home. He opened the bedroom door carefully and stepped inside. Vanessa was already asleep, or pretending to be. She lay facing away from him, the phone now on the nightstand, screen down. Daniel stood there for a moment longer, watching her breathing, studying the curve of her back beneath the covers. He remembered when that sight filled him with peace. Now, it only filled him with questions. He crawled into bed, careful not to disturb her, and lay on his side, staring into the dark. He wanted to ask her what was really going on. He wanted to scream, or cry, or shake her until she told the truth, whatever that was. But he didn't. Instead, he whispered almost to himself, "Hey, babe, you okay?" Vanessa didn't look up from her phone. "Fine, just tired." Chapter 2. The red flags begin to multiply. The weeks that followed the long, lonely evenings of Chapter 1 brought with them a slow but insistent storm of changes. Daniel, who had once dismissed the subtle shifts in Vanessa's behavior as the byproducts of stress or exhaustion, now found himself confronted with a barrage of inexplicable signals. Mornings became a gauntlet of half-hearted greetings, while evenings offered only brief, distracted exchanges, leaving him to wonder when his wife had stopped being his confidant and partner. One crisp autumn morning, Daniel's routine was shattered when he met up with his friend Mike at the local coffee shop. The scent of roasted beans and the soft murmur of early conversations contrasted sharply with the storm of doubts churning in Daniel's mind. As they settled into a booth near the window, Mike's eyes sparkled with concern and a tinge of mischief. "Dude, she doesn't post you on socials anymore. She used to brag about you all the time." Mike's tone was casual, but layered with an implication that struck a nerve in Daniel. For a moment, Daniel remembered the days when Vanessa's Instagram was filled with photos of them laughing together, her captions brimming with pride and affection. Now, her profile was a sparse, almost impersonal gallery, and Daniel couldn't help but feel like a ghost in his own life. Daniel sighed, stirring his coffee absent-mindedly. "I thought maybe it was just me being paranoid," he admitted, his voice low. He recalled the furtive glances, the sudden need to hide her phone, and the way her eyes would dart away whenever he tried to share his thoughts with her. Lately, every small action seemed laced with secrecy: a guarded smile, a delayed reply to a text, or a hurried exit from the living room whenever he entered. Returning home that evening, Daniel found himself more alert than ever to these subtle cues. He lingered in the hallway, eavesdropping on the sounds of the house with an intensity that he'd never felt before. Vanessa was in the living room, her back turned to him. The television flickered in the background, casting intermittent shadows over her face, but her focus was entirely on her phone. Her thumbs moved with an almost obsessive determination, scrolling, tapping, and then pausing as if someone or something demanded her attention. "Hey, Vanessa," Daniel ventured, his voice careful. "We need to talk tonight." She didn't answer immediately. She only glanced at him for a fleeting second before returning to the screen. There was an icy quality to her glance that made his stomach clench, a mix of irritation and something else he couldn't place. Over the next few days, the pattern became even more pronounced. Vanessa began locking her phone with a speed that surprised him, securing it behind a password she refused to share. It was as though the device had become a vault for secrets too dangerous to be open, even to him. One particular evening, Daniel was tidying up the living room when he reached for a cushion on the sofa. As he did, his hand brushed against something crumpled and tucked behind it. Curious, he pulled it out and discovered a receipt for a luxury hotel, a hotel he'd never heard Vanessa mention in conversation. The paper was slightly damp, as if it had been concealed in a moment of haste. His pulse quickened. Had she really spent money on a hotel she had no reason to book? Or was it a misplaced receipt from a business trip? The questions wrestled with his logic, but the lingering sense of betrayal was unmistakable. Determined to understand what was happening, Daniel waited until dinner time, a meal often served cold or absent these days, before gently broaching the subject. They sat at the cramped dining table, the silence between them thick enough to choke on. He slid the receipt across the table toward her, his hands trembling slightly. "Vanessa, what's this?" he asked, his voice steady but urgent. For the first time that evening, her eyes met his, and he saw a flash of panic quickly masked by irritation. "Why are you always looking for problems?" she retorted, setting the receipt aside with a dismissive flick of her wrist. "It's nothing, just a receipt. Don't make a big deal out of it." "But what receipt is that?" Daniel pressed, leaning forward as though the truth might be found in the creases of the paper. "A hotel? You said you were just out to run errands." Her face hardened, and a terse edge cut through her tone. "Maybe if you worked as hard at understanding my needs as you do at fixing cars, you wouldn't be so clueless." The words stung, and Daniel felt a familiar mix of hurt and indignation well up inside him. He had always prided himself on his reliability and caring nature. Now, his desperate need for reassurance was being repelled with scorn. Later that night, as the shadows lengthened and the house settled into an uneasy quiet, Daniel found himself alone with his thoughts. He paced the floor of his study, the soft hum of the city outside serving as a constant reminder of life moving on without him. His mind replayed the conversation, the tone of Vanessa's voice, the sharpness of her words. It was as though she had built an invisible wall between them, brick by brick, silence by silence. The following days brought more of the same. Vanessa's behavior grew increasingly erratic. At night, when the clocks ticked past midnight, he would hear the soft murmur of her voice in hushed, urgent conversations. She became a shadow in their home, a presence that moved like a ghost through corridors she once filled with warmth and laughter. When he tried to reach out, offering a gentle touch or a kind word, she would flinch as if his hand were burning her. Every day, Daniel felt more alone. He attempted to bridge the gap by suggesting they spend an evening together, perhaps a quiet dinner out or even a simple movie night at home, but Vanessa would decline, citing vague reasons of being too tired or having to leave early. The dreams of rekindling their closeness faded a little more with each passing day. One afternoon, after coming home from a particularly grueling shift, Daniel sat on the porch, watching as the leaves danced in the wind. His cell phone vibrated with a message, one that confirmed his suspicions. A text from an unknown number with a brief note that simply read, "Luxury is just a receipt away." The mystery deepened, and each unanswered question gnawed at him with increasing intensity. In between his long hours at the auto shop, Daniel's thoughts were consumed by Vanessa. At every break, every idle moment, he replayed the subtle shifts in her demeanor, the locked phone, the secretive whispers in the night, the receipts that told a story his heart wasn't ready to believe. He began to realize that what had once been minor annoyances were now glaring red flags that could no longer be ignored. Late one evening, as the wind howled outside like an omen, Daniel confronted Vanessa again. "Vanessa, we need to talk about us," he started, his voice trembling with a blend of hope and trepidation. "I feel like you're shutting me out. I don't know what's going on anymore." She looked at him, her eyes hard and distant. "You always think there's something wrong, Daniel. Maybe it's your own fault, your lack of ambition," she said bitterly, her tone escalating. "I mean, you never do more than just exist. I need someone who can truly share my life, not someone who hides behind work and routines." Her words cut deep. Daniel's heart felt heavy with resignation and pain, a pain that was growing with every new piece of evidence he uncovered about the woman he once thought he knew completely. The conversation ended in a flurry of accusations and bitter remarks. As he walked away, Daniel's mind was awhirl with the growing realization that the emotional distance between them was not just a temporary rift, but the beginning of something far more concerning. At that moment, his phone buzzed once again, a message from Mike reinforcing what he had already begun to suspect. With a sinking feeling, Daniel read the message that seemed to encapsulate all the red flags in a single, undeniable statement. Daniel's friend, Mike, raises concerns. "Dude, she doesn't post you on socials anymore. She used to brag about you all the time." Vanessa now locks her phone, keeps late hours, and flinches when Daniel touches her. He finds a receipt for a luxury hotel in her purse. Daniel tries to confront her, but she turns it into an argument about his lack of ambition and how he's emotionally unavailable. The emotional distance grows. Chapter 3. The kids notice too. Daniel sat at the kitchen table, absent-mindedly stirring a spoon through his lukewarm coffee. Across from him, his daughter Grace, just 8 years old, was slowly munching on a slice of toast while her legs swung under the chair. Her bright eyes kept flicking toward the empty seat at the end of the table, the one Vanessa used to sit in every night. "Daddy," Grace asked, her voice soft but curious, "why doesn't Mommy eat dinner with us anymore?" The question hit Daniel harder than he expected. He looked up from his coffee, meeting her innocent gaze. There was no anger or sadness in her voice, just a quiet confusion, the kind only a child could feel when something feels off but hasn't yet learned to name it. "She's just busy, sweetie," Daniel replied, forcing a smile. "She has a lot going on with work, that's all." Grace nodded slowly but didn't look convinced. She glanced toward the stairs. "She's always on her phone. Even when I asked her to help with my school project, she just said she didn't have time." Daniel didn't respond. He couldn't, because Grace was right. Vanessa wasn't just distant from him anymore. She was slipping away from the kids, too. That night, Daniel tucked Grace into bed and kissed her forehead. As he stood up to leave, his son Liam, 6 years old, poked his head out from the hallway with a nervous look on his face. "Dad," Liam whispered, "I heard Mommy talking to someone on the phone last night." She was whispering and giggling. Daniel froze. His throat tightened, and he kneeled down next to Liam. "You did? What time was it?" Liam shrugged. "Late. I couldn't sleep. I went to pee, and I heard her. She was in the bathroom with the door closed." Daniel's mind raced. Vanessa had told him she was just taking a late shower. He'd heard the water running. Had she turned it on just to muffle her voice? "You're not in trouble," Daniel said softly. "Thanks for telling me, buddy." Liam hugged him before heading to bed, leaving Daniel alone in the dim hallway, staring down toward the bathroom door. A creeping anxiety crawled up his spine. The walls of the house no longer felt familiar. They were full of secrets now, secrets that clung to the shadows and whispered to him through his children's voices. That night, Daniel didn't sleep. Instead, he sat on the edge of the bed, pretending to doze while Vanessa typed furiously beside him, screen dimmed, face bathed in ghostly blue light. At 12:47 a.m., she suddenly got up and tiptoed out of the room. He heard the creak of the hallway floorboards, then the soft click of the bathroom door closing. Daniel rose and followed quietly. From outside the door, he could hear her muffled voice. Laughter, low and intimate, like the kind they used to share when they first fell in love. He couldn't make out words, just the rhythm, the kind of voice a woman used when she wanted someone to feel special. His hand hovered over the doorknob, then dropped. He didn't barge in. He didn't confront her. Instead, he went back to bed and stared at the ceiling until the sun began to rise. The next day, something in him changed. The hope he'd clung to began to rot into something colder, something more calculating. He needed to know the truth, not guess at it, not wonder, not piece together scraps of suspicion from overheard whispers and children's questions. He spent his lunch break in the truck outside his shop, researching discreet tracking apps. It felt dirty like spying, but as he scrolled through the options, he remembered the look in Grace's eyes when she asked why her mother didn't eat dinner with him anymore. He remembered Liam's voice in the hallway, trembling, confused. He downloaded a hidden monitoring app and installed on Vanessa's phone the next time she left it unattended in the bathroom. It took less than 3 minutes. His hands shook the whole time. He felt sick afterward, but he needed to know, and the app didn't take long to deliver. The first few days showed her normal routine: work, grocery store, a quick stop at the salon. Nothing unusual. Daniel started to think maybe he'd lost his mind. But then came the Thursday visit. Her location pinged around 4:18 p.m. Not at her office, not at the grocery store, but across town at a private fitness center he had never heard her mention. The place wasn't part of their gym membership. In fact, it wasn't a gym at all. It was a high-end, members-only boutique fitness club with massage therapy, private saunas, and personal training packages that cost more than Daniel made in a week. The next day, she went again. Same time, same place. No gym bag, no sneakers, just a quick change of clothes and a long stay. 1 hour and 42 minutes the first visit, 2 hours the second. That night, Vanessa came home later than usual. Her hair was damp, but not from sweat. She didn't smell like shampoo or body wash. She smelled like expensive cologne. Not hers, not his. Daniel didn't ask her anything. He simply watched. took mental notes, listened to every excuse she mumbled while scrolling through her phone. Her lies were getting lazy. Long meeting ran over, she said casually, tossing her heels by the door. He didn't respond, just nodded and offered to reheat the pasta he made. She said she wasn't hungry. The next night, Daniel sat alone in the kitchen with a beer, watching the app log her next location. Again, the same fitness center. Again, she didn't bring her gym bag. Again, she stayed well past an hour. He gripped the neck of the bottle tighter as the icon blinked on the map. She was lying, blatantly, repeatedly, and now the kids were asking questions. Now he was tracking her like some detective in his own marriage. And still, he hadn't confronted her. He wasn't ready. Not yet. He needed more. The app logs several visits to a fitness center across town, a place she never mentioned. Chapter 4. Discovery and Denial. Daniel sat in his truck, fingers wrapped tightly around the steering wheel, his knuckles pale. The late evening sun dipped behind the tree line, casting long, golden shadows across the dashboard. The air inside the vehicle was heavy, tense with anticipation, dread, and something colder, the weight of truth finally knocking on his door. The tracker had pinged again. Vanessa wasn't at work. She wasn't at her sister's. And she sure as hell wasn't at the boutique fitness center she claimed to visit so religiously these days. No. Tonight her location was pinned to a near-empty parking lot behind an upscale cigar lounge across town. A place Daniel had driven by a dozen times, but never stepped foot in. It wasn't her scene. Not by a long shot. And yet, here he was. He parked half a block away, stepping out of the truck slowly like a man preparing to walk through fire. The wind tugged at his hoodie as he approached the corner of the alley that led to the lot. His boots crunched softly over gravel, and every step tightened the knot in his gut. There it was, a sleek black SUV, windows tinted like obsidian, parked in the far corner of the lot. Not moving. Engine off. Its placement was too deliberate, hidden in plain sight, as if whoever drove it knew how to disappear without leaving. Daniel crouched behind a dumpster, pulling his phone out with trembling fingers. He zoomed in, his breath caught in his throat. Vanessa. She was in the passenger seat, angled toward someone beside her. Her face was lit by soft, blue ambient lights inside the vehicle. She was smiling. No, giggling. Her hand moved in the air, brushing something. Then her head tilted back and rested against the seat. The man beside her leaned closer, broad shoulders shifting forward. Daniel saw his profile, clearly now. Dark-skinned, muscular, sharp-jawed. He looked like someone carved out of a men's fitness magazine. Daniel's stomach turned. He began snapping photos, each shutter click feeling like a betrayal of the last ounce of innocence he'd been clinging to. A kiss followed, slow, deliberate, intimate. Vanessa's hand rested on the man's thigh, her wedding ring glinting in the car's interior light. The ring Daniel had placed there 10 years ago. He couldn't breathe. For a long time, he didn't move, just crouched there in stunned silence while the pictures burned their way into his phone and into his memory. Eventually, he stood. He didn't remember walking back to the truck. He didn't remember turning the ignition. But there he was, hands shaking, driving home under a blanket of moonlight that felt colder than ever before. Vanessa got home just after midnight. She walked in smelling of expensive cologne and cheap alibis, dropping her purse on the table like nothing was wrong. Her heels clicked loudly against the hardwood as she made her way into the living room where Daniel waited. She stopped short when she saw him. "You're still up?" He stood slowly from the armchair. "Yeah," he said, voice calm, too calm. "I couldn't sleep." She blinked, then smiled, tight-lipped and fake. "Long meeting ran late. You know how it is." "I do," he replied, "which is why I followed you tonight." Her smile froze. For the first time in months, she actually looked afraid. "What are you talking about?" she said, stepping back slightly. Daniel pulled out his phone. He opened the gallery and showed her the photos, one by one, letting the silence stretch between each tap of his thumb. The SUV, the kiss, her hand on the man's leg. Vanessa's eyes darted from the screen to his face and back again. There was a long pause. Then she laughed, a cold, sharp, almost cruel sound that echoed through the living room like glass breaking. "So you're stalking me now?" she spat, shaking her head in disbelief. Wow, Daniel. Didn't think you had it in you. He stared at her, unmoving. I needed to know the truth. She walked past him and grabbed a water bottle from the fridge, casually taking a sip as though she hadn't just been caught cheating. You know, she continued, wiping her mouth, maybe if you had this much passion in bed, I wouldn't have to go elsewhere. The words hit him like a punch to the throat. Daniel felt the air leave his lungs. The accusation, brutal, personal, and undeserved, hung in the air like smoke. Is that what this is about? He asked quietly, barely recognizing his own voice. You're blaming me? Vanessa scoffed and crossed her arms. You act like I'm some villain, but maybe you should take a good look at yourself. You're emotionally unavailable. You come home tired, worn out, smelling like oil and sweat. You stopped being fun years ago, Daniel. His jaw clenched, heart pounding. So, your answer was to sneak around behind my back. She rolled her eyes. He's just a friend. You're being controlling now. Daniel stared at her. I have photos of you kissing him. And? That doesn't mean what you think it means. He blinked. You were in his car for 2 hours. Vanessa threw her hands up, her tone growing louder. You know what? I'm done defending myself to someone who's always playing the victim. Grow up, Daniel. He was shattered, but she gaslighted him hard. He's just a friend. You're being controlling. Chapter 5. The Final Betrayal. The clock on the wall read 7:42 p.m. Daniel sat on the living room couch, nursing a lukewarm beer, remote in hand, flipping through channels without really watching anything. The faint noise of a talk show host blared in the background, but it barely registered. His mind was elsewhere, on her, always on her lately. Vanessa had been upstairs for the past hour, getting ready for a girls' night out. She told him earlier that she and her coworkers were hitting some new wine bar downtown. He'd forced a nod, forced a smile, and even offered to watch the kids, though she casually mentioned they were already with her sister for the weekend. Convenient. Daniel couldn't shake the heaviness in his chest, the tight coil of instinct screaming that something was off. Again, she had been cold all day, no eye contact, no kiss, not even a goodbye hug when she left for her hair appointment that afternoon. That distance had become a third presence in their home, quiet but suffocating. The sound of high heels on the hardwood snapped him out of his daze. He turned his head, expecting her to come down, maybe ask if her lipstick looked okay, or if she looked too overdressed for a wine night. But it wasn't her. A man, tall, dark-skinned, and built like a linebacker, strode through the front door like he owned the place. Daniel jumped to his feet, startled and confused. The man wasn't just confident. He was smug, like this wasn't the first time he'd been in Daniel's house. Who the hell? Daniel began, fists clenching by instinct. The stranger didn't flinch. In fact, he smirked, eyes scanning the living room like he was already making himself at home. Relax, man, the stranger said with a casual chuckle, stepping forward. No need to get worked up. Daniel took a step forward. Who the fuck are you? What are you doing in my house? The stranger tilted his head, amused. Then he leaned against the wall and dropped the bombshell with zero hesitation. Hey, loser, your wife is coming with me tonight. I'm going to give her the wild night she's been dreaming of. Daniel's blood froze. He stared at the man, blinking once, twice, as if his brain refused to process what he just heard. The words echoed in his skull, ringing louder with every second. What? His voice came out hoarse, cracked. Footsteps echoed from upstairs, slow, deliberate. Vanessa appeared on the staircase, moving like she was walking a runway. Her long, wavy hair curled down over her shoulders, her lips painted blood red. The tight, scarlet dress she wore clung to her body like sin, revealing just enough to make Daniel's stomach churn with a mix of heartbreak and fury. She paused halfway down the steps, locking eyes with him. No guilt, no shame, only a sharp, twisted smirk curling across her lips. She looked like a stranger. Daniel's voice cracked. Vanessa, what the hell is going on? She reached the bottom of the stairs, stepped beside the muscular stranger, and looked Daniel up and down like he was some boring exhibit at a museum. Don't wait up for me, she said coolly. I'm done pretending. Daniel felt like the floor had dropped out from beneath him. His knees weakened. His throat went dry. The man threw an arm casually around Vanessa's waist like it was routine, like he'd done it before, like he belonged there more than Daniel did. The smugness in his eyes made Daniel's hands tremble. "You should try to relax, man," the stranger said with a chuckle. "We'll be gone all night. She's been needing this. Hell, she's been begging for it." Vanessa let out a light laugh, tilting her head against the man's shoulder. Daniel stood there, motionless. His heart was pounding so loudly he could barely hear anything else. He wanted to scream, to yell, to punch a hole through the wall. But instead, he stood frozen in his own house, reduced to nothing more than a spectator in the destruction of his marriage. Vanessa walked toward the door, heels clicking like a countdown. She turned to him one last time, her voice dripping with venomous satisfaction. "I'm leaving, honey," she said. "I'm going to have so much fun tonight." Then she leaned in, whispering just loud enough for him to hear. "Don't wait up for me. I'm done pretending." She walked out laughing with the man. Chapter 6. Rock Bottom. Daniel sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at the silent clock above the stove. The same clock that Vanessa once insisted on hanging there, saying it gave the kitchen character. Its second hand ticked forward, oblivious to the devastation in the room beneath it. The silence in the house was unbearable. 3 days had passed since that night. The night Vanessa walked out with the other man, laughing, mocking, wearing the kind of dress you don't wear for wine and gossip with the girls. She never came back. When Daniel woke up the next morning, the house was even emptier than before. The kids' rooms were stripped bare. Their clothes, backpacks, toys all gone. Their tiny shoes that once lined the hallway were missing like they had never existed. His heart plummeted. He ran to the dresser. His savings folder gone. His emergency cash from the garage drawer gone. Bank account drained. Joint savings zeroed out. The last text she ever sent him read simply, "Don't try to find us. It's over." Just like that, Vanessa was gone. She left without a forwarding address, without a conversation, without even pretending to offer closure. The woman he'd shared a decade of memories with had morphed into a ghost, and she'd taken his children with her. The following days blurred together in a haze of grief and disbelief. Daniel stopped going to work. He barely slept, barely ate. The auto shop called, left voicemails, asked if he was okay. Eventually, they stopped asking and simply let him go. Customers needed reliability, and Daniel couldn't even hold a conversation without his voice cracking. One rainy afternoon, he drove to Vanessa's sister's house, hoping to see the kids, just a glimpse. Her brother-in-law opened the door and stared at him like he was dirt on a boot. "She doesn't want to see you, man," he said flatly. "Frankly, I don't blame her." "What the hell are you talking about?" Daniel asked, his voice shaking. "She cheated on me. She left me." The brother-in-law raised his eyebrows. "Yeah, well, people are saying you were abusive, controlling, neglectful, that you drove her to it." Daniel felt like he'd been punched. "What? That's not true." He was met with a shrug. "That's her story." No one believed him. Vanessa had poisoned the well before she left, spread rumors to family and friends that painted him as the villain. Overnight, Daniel became a cautionary tale, a whispered warning. The guy who couldn't keep his wife happy. The man who got replaced. Even her mother, who once called him the best thing that ever happened to her daughter, refused to answer his calls. His own parents long gone. His friend Mike tried to be there for the first week, but eventually stopped coming around. The isolation grew louder. The walls of the house closed in like they resented his presence. The smell of her perfume lingered on the couch cushions like a cruel joke. The silence of his children's laughter haunted every corner. He found one of Grace's hairbands under the couch and just stared at it for an hour, tears falling silently onto the floor. He drank more than he should have. Some nights, he'd wake up on the bathroom floor, head pounding, wondering how he got there. Other nights, he didn't sleep at all. He'd sit in the hallway, back against the wall, watching the front door, almost hoping Vanessa would walk back in and say it was all a test. Some sick, cruel dream. But she never came. One evening, when the electricity was cut off due to unpaid bills, Daniel lit a candle and sat in the living room surrounded by shadows. Outside, rain pelted the windows like the sky itself was trying to break in. He stared into the flame for hours, wondering what the hell he'd done to deserve any of this. He considered ending it. More than once. He stood on the overpass one night, gripping the rail with white knuckles, staring at the roaring highway beneath. The wind howled, cold and bitter, as cars blurred below like streaks of color and noise. But he didn't jump. Somewhere deep in his bones, there was still a flicker of resistance. Some fractured shard of pride that refused to let her be the last word in his story. Weeks passed. The house grew darker, emptier. He sold the truck, sold the tools, and barely scraped together enough to keep the mortgage afloat. His phone battery died and stayed dead for days. Bills piled up, debt collected like mold. Then, one morning, Daniel found himself in the garage, digging through a plastic tub of old family photos. He hadn't eaten in 2 days. His clothes hung loose on his body. His eyes were hollow. He pulled out a framed picture, dusty, cracked in one corner. It was from 3 years ago. A beach trip. Grace sat on his shoulders, smiling with her missing front teeth. Liam stood beside him, clutching a sandcastle bucket. Vanessa, she was behind them, hand on Daniel's shoulder, beaming. He stared at that image, heart hammering. Not in anger, not in sadness, but in clarity. Something inside him snapped, and not in a way that broke him. It was something else, a steel resolve rising like smoke from the ashes. He stood up slowly, still holding the photo. His jaw tightened, his shoulders straightened, and for the first time in months, Daniel spoke out loud. Not to her, not to anyone, just to himself. I'm not dying like this. I'm going to become someone she'll never forget. Chapter 7. 3 years later, the transformation. 3 years can either bury a man or forge him into something unrecognizable. For Daniel, it did both. The man who had once stood on the edge of despair was gone, burned away in the fire of betrayal and loss. In his place stood someone leaner, sharper, colder. After selling the house at a loss, Daniel left that cursed town behind. He packed what little remained into a used Dodge Ram and drove west, stopping only when the pain didn't follow him quite so loudly. He landed in a modest town outside Denver, quiet, blue-collar, but growing. He found a cheap studio above an old warehouse and slept on the floor for the first month. He got to work immediately. The gym became his temple. At first, it was just something to do between the pain. Then it became a ritual. By the end of the first year, his arms were corded with muscle, his jaw sharper, his eyes colder. The mirror no longer reflected the broken man Vanessa had left behind. It showed someone forged from grit and purpose. Next, he took a job as a freelance mechanic. His skills were never in question. He was one of the best. What started as side jobs and driveways turned into something real. He found an abandoned service bay, fixed it up, and slapped a new sign out front. Redline Performance Auto. By year 2, he had a waiting list 3 weeks long. By year 3, he was turning away business. Money came. Confidence followed. He didn't chase women. He didn't post thirst traps or selfies. He wasn't trying to get back out there. He didn't need to. People noticed anyway, especially the women. They asked questions, made moves, flirted. But Daniel wasn't looking for anyone. He was building something. Quietly. Relentlessly. One Saturday afternoon, the city hosted a volunteer day. Local businesses gathered to give back, cleaning up streets, feeding the homeless, helping at community centers. Daniel didn't go for recognition. He liked the quiet work, rolling up his sleeves and blending in. He was in the back of the community pantry, loading crates of canned goods, when he heard it. A voice he hadn't heard in 3 years. Daniel. The word hit him like a sucker punch to the gut, but he didn't flinch. He froze for half a second, the tension gripping his spine. Then he straightened, stood tall, and turned. She looked nothing like the woman who once strutted down their staircase in a red dress, smirking at his heartbreak. Vanessa stood 10 feet away. Her once perfect hair was knotted and dull, her face gaunt, makeup smudged, eyes rimmed with fatigue. She wore an oversized hoodie that couldn't hide how thin, almost frail, she'd become. And behind her were Grace and Liam. But they were older now. Grace was about 9, Liam around 7. Both clung to her sides like frightened shadows. Their cheeks were hollow. Their clothes hung loose. Daniel's stomach twisted. Vanessa's mouth opened again, softer this time. I didn't know you lived here. Daniel didn't answer. His gaze shifted down to the kids. Grace recognized him first. Her eyes widened, and she whispered something to her brother. Liam looked up. "Daddy." His heart nearly stopped. For a brief second, the walls around Daniel trembled. His chest ached, but he held the line. He didn't move. He didn't kneel or run. He stared at the woman who had shattered his life, and he waited. Vanessa's lip trembled. I heard someone say you were in a shop nearby. I wasn't sure it was you. We came to the pantry. We've been struggling. He raised an eyebrow. Struggling? She nodded, a tear slipping down her cheek. Things didn't work out. With him, Daniel bit back the bitter chuckle rising in his throat. Of course they didn't. She looked down, ashamed. He cheated. Left us. No money. No job. I've been doing what I can. Temp work. Cleaning. But the rent. Her voice cracked. I lost everything. Daniel didn't speak. She took a tentative step forward. You look different. Stronger. He remained still, his arms crossed. The weight of the moment pressed down like steel plates. He remembered everything. Every lie. Every cruel word. Every night, he stared at an empty wall, aching for his children. I had to be, he finally said. The kids shifted nervously. Grace's hand reached toward him, unsure. Vanessa spoke quickly. I didn't know where else to go. I'm not asking for much. Just, maybe you could help the kids. A little. Groceries. Or clothes. Daniel exhaled through his nose. Measured. Calm. He looked down at Grace and Liam again. His heart screamed to hold them. To ask them about school, about favorite shows, about everything he'd missed. But he stayed rooted. His voice was steady. You stole everything from me, he said, eyes locked on Vanessa. My home. My savings. My children. And then you lied about me to everyone who would listen. I was scared, she whispered. I made mistakes. No, he said coldly. You made choices. She wilted like a dying flower. No more fight left in her. And yet, the kids were innocent. They deserved better. Always had. Daniel reached into his back pocket, pulled out a business card, and handed it to Grace. This has my number. If you need anything, school supplies, food, a jacket, you call me directly. Not her. Me. Grace clutched it like gold. Vanessa tried to speak again, but Daniel raised a hand. No speeches. No guilt. You made your bed. He turned to walk away, back toward the crates, the work, the new life he'd built with blood and willpower. As he stepped out of the light, he heard her voice one last time behind him, cracked, small, trembling. Daniel. He didn't turn around. He just kept walking. Daniel. It's Vanessa, disheveled, broke, and dragging two hungry kids behind her. Chapter 8. The Confrontation. Daniel didn't sleep that night. After the pantry encounter, the kids' faces haunted him, especially Grace's. The quiet way she clutched that business card. The hollow ache in Liam's voice when he called him Daddy. He sat in his apartment, lights dim, a cold cup of coffee forgotten on the table as he stared at the wall. So many emotions churned in his chest. Anger, sadness, pity, rage, confusion. But above it all, a deep, anchored resolve. The next day, around noon, a knock echoed through the garage office door at Redline Performance. He didn't look up. Another knock, lighter this time. Then a pause and a voice. Daniel, it's me. He let the silence stretch. Vanessa stood on the other side, fidgeting with her sleeves, eyes sunken, lips chapped. She wore the same hoodie from yesterday, hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. This wasn't the high-heeled, perfectly contoured woman he once knew. This was a ghost of her. He opened the door, but didn't step aside. What do you want? Her voice cracked before she even began. I needed to see you. Please. He motioned silently toward the waiting bench outside the garage, a place where customers usually sat while he changed their oil or fixed their brakes. She shuffled over, sat, and folded her arms like she was trying to hold herself together. Daniel leaned against the wall nearby, arms crossed, his face unreadable. I'm sorry, she started, voice trembling. I know I don't deserve a second of your time, but I had to try. Daniel said nothing. I thought I knew what I wanted back then, she said. I thought he was excitement, freedom. You promised the world. Said you were just holding me back. I deserve more. She glanced up, searching his eyes for something. He made me feel alive. For a while. But then the real man showed up. Daniel didn't blink. He hit me. She whispered, told me I was nothing without him. Drained my savings. Lied. Cheated. Left me in a motel room with the kids and a pile of unpaid bills. He vanished. No goodbye. No note. Still, Daniel said nothing. Vanessa's hands trembled in her lap. I was stupid. I was selfish. And I lost everything. Now her voice cracked, the tears breaking free. And the worst part? I deserve it. I deserve all of it. But those kids, they don't. She buried her face in her hands, sobbing quietly. Daniel watched, arms still crossed, his expression stone. He let her cry for a long minute before he finally spoke. Why now? She blinked through the tears. What? You knew where I was. My name is on the sign outside this place. I never changed it. You knew. She looked down. I was ashamed. Scared. I didn't think you'd even look at me. You were right. She winced. Daniel stepped away from the wall, walking a slow circle in front of her. His voice was cold steel. You didn't miss me, Vanessa. You missed security. You missed the warm house, the paid bills, the man who worked himself to the bone while you texted your new adventure in the bathroom. She started shaking her head. No, that's not true. He cut her off. You traded our life for a fantasy, for ego. And when it collapsed, you came crawling back. Not because you love me, because I survived it. And you didn't. She stood, desperate now, stepping toward him. I was stupid, Daniel. I was lost. I thought the grass was greener. I thought you didn't care anymore, that you'd given up on us. I thought, you thought wrong, he snapped. And you burned everything down because of it. Tears streamed down her face, but he didn't move. He didn't soften. She clasped her hands together. Please, I'm not asking for much. Just a chance to make it right. I miss the way things used to be. I miss waking up beside you. I miss the way you looked at me like I was the only woman on earth. Daniel took a breath, slow and deep, then met her eyes. That woman doesn't exist anymore, and neither does the man who loved her. She staggered back like he'd slapped her. Her lip trembled. I miss us. He held her gaze for a long moment. Then came the final blow. I don't. Vanessa crumbled onto the bench, shoulders shaking, wiping her tears on her sleeve. He turned toward the shop door, ready to go back inside, but paused. His voice softened just enough to cut deeper. I'll help the kids, not you. Chapter 9. Redemption and Closure. The courtroom was silent, except for the sound of shuffling papers and the tapping of the judge's pen. Daniel sat straight in his charcoal gray suit, hands folded tightly in his lap. On the bench across from him, Vanessa looked thinner than ever, gaunt, tired, and jittery. Her lawyer whispered something into her ear. She barely responded. Daniel's attorney, Carla Hughes, glanced at him and gave a subtle nod. The final stretch was in sight. Given the evidence of abandonment, financial instability, emotional abuse suffered by the minors, and the testimonies of witnesses regarding their mother's neglectful behavior, this court hereby grants full legal and physical custody of Grace and Liam Ramirez to their father, Daniel Ramirez. The gavel struck. The sound echoed like thunder in Daniel's chest. It was over. Vanessa broke into tears across the room, slumping into her lawyer's shoulder. Daniel didn't look at her. He stood, quietly thanked Carla, and walked out of the courtroom into the light of a new chapter. The next few months were a whirlwind of adjustments and healing. Daniel moved into a new home on the edge of town, a modest two-story brick house with a fenced-in yard, a swing set, and a cozy room for each child. He hired a kind, older woman named Maria to help care for Grace and Liam while he managed the growing success of Redline Performance. Every night, he read to them. Every morning, he packed their lunches, kissed their foreheads, and sent them off to school. Grace started drawing again. Liam joined Little League. Laughter returned to the house, hesitant at first, but then bold, carefree, full. One Sunday afternoon, while watching the kids build a pillow fort in the living room, Maria handed Daniel a small envelope. It came this morning, she said, frowning. No return address. Daniel opened it carefully. Inside was a photo of Vanessa in lingerie, leaning against a hotel headboard. Her lipstick was a vivid red, scrawled across the back in her handwriting. I still think about that night in the cabin. We can have it again if you want. He stared at it for a long moment, then quietly dropped it into the fireplace. The flames devoured the image, curling her face in a black ash. She'd been trying for weeks, texting from unknown numbers, using fake Facebook accounts, even showing up at Redline once in tears. Daniel didn't speak. He simply handed her a cease and desist order and closed the door in her face. The woman he once knew was gone, and he was no longer the man she remembered. One late evening, after the kids had gone to bed and Maria had left for the night, Daniel sat in his study. The lights were low. Rain tapped gently against the window. A leather-bound journal lay open in front of him, next to a glass of scotch and a silver pen. He stared at the blank page for a moment. Then he began to write. There was a time I thought the pain would kill me, that the betrayal would consume everything good in me. I was hollow, broken, forgotten. He paused, exhaling slowly. But the storm passed. I crawled through it, alone, angry, afraid, and somehow I kept going. For the kids. For myself. He took a sip of scotch, then kept writing. She left me in the ruins of a life I built with my bare hands. And now I've built something stronger. Something unshakable. My children laugh again. My home is full of warmth. My business thrives. I wake up without dread in my chest. Another pause. She texts. She begs. She sends pictures. She tries to weaponize memories. But they don't work on me anymore. I see her for what she is now. Not a lover. Not even a ghost. Just a lesson. Daniel stared at the page, his jaw tight, the pen gripped in steady fingers. Then he wrote the final line, pressing hard with the ink. She broke me, but I rebuilt. Stronger, wiser, untouchable. Chapter 10. The final line. The sun was dipping low, casting a warm amber glow over Daniel's backyard. The smell of grilled meat mingled with fresh-cut grass and the distant laughter of children. It was the kind of evening Daniel once thought he'd never have again. The kind where peace wasn't just a fleeting dream, but a lived reality. A group of friends gathered around picnic tables, plates heavy with burgers and corn on the cob. Children darted between legs and chairs, shrieking in joy as they chased a frisbee. The air was thick with the hum of cicadas and the clinking of cold drinks. Daniel leaned against the wooden fence, arms crossed, watching the scene unfold with a quiet smile. Beside him stood Claire, his girlfriend of over a year, a soft, steady presence in his life. Her warm eyes met his, and she squeezed his arm gently. "You've come a long way," she said quietly. He nodded, still watching Grace and Liam running barefoot through the sprinkler, their faces radiant with pure happiness. "Yeah," he replied. "Feels like a lifetime ago. I thought this would never happen." Claire's fingers laced with his. "You earned it." Daniel looked down at their joined hands, squeezing hers back. She was different from Vanessa, steadfast, loyal, and kind. The kind of woman who didn't need to be chased or fought for. The kind he could trust. "Thanks for being here," he said, voice low but sincere. She smiled. "Always." As the sun slid behind the horizon, Daniel's thoughts drifted. The journey that had brought him here was etched deep into his bones. Every sleepless night, every shattered hope, every painful betrayal. He remembered that night 3 years ago. The stranger's smirk, Vanessa's cold laugh, the weight of disbelief and despair crushing him. But also the nights after, when he wanted to give up but didn't. Where he fought to reclaim his life, to rebuild from the ashes. Daniel took a deep breath, the summer air filling his lungs like a promise. He glanced at the children again. Grace had just thrown her arms around Liam's shoulders, whispering a secret that made him laugh until he doubled over. They were safe now, loved. A small, grateful smile tugged at Daniel's lips. Claire leaned closer, resting her head against his shoulder. "Tell me what you're thinking." He hesitated, then murmured, "She thought she destroyed me, but she was just the fire that forged me." Claire squeezed his hand. The grill hissed behind them as Mike, Daniel's oldest friend, called out from the picnic table. "Hey, boss man, you gonna let me eat? Or are you just gonna keep staring at your little kingdom?" Daniel chuckled, shaking off the heaviness. "Come get it, man. Plenty for everyone." As the group laughed and the kids continued to play, Daniel felt a profound sense of calm settle over him. He'd endured heartbreak and betrayal that would have broken many men. But he hadn't just survived. He'd become something stronger. Not just a man who rebuilt his life, but one who reclaimed his soul. Later that night, when the last guest had gone and the children were tucked in bed, Daniel sat alone on the porch, the cool night air wrapping around him. He gazed up at the stars, feeling the weight of all he'd lost and all he'd gained. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the old family photo, the one from the beach trip years ago. He traced the edges softly, then folded it away. No regrets, only lessons. His voice barely more than a whisper, Daniel said to himself, "Some betrayals don't break you. They reveal the warrior you were meant to be."